Hey folks, how you doing? Dave McRae here. So, there's two things I want to talk about today, and the first is going to be a part of a quote that appeared in EW, which is Entertainment Weekly, a couple of days ago, a few days ago, I guess, when the news broke that actress Judy Greer was in negotiations to take on the role of Laurie Strode's daughter in next year's Halloween film. And the second thing I want to talk about, which I'll talk about after, is something really big that seems to have slipped right under the radar, and nobody's talking about it. But let's start here first. As you know, 4 or 5 days ago now, or whatever it was announced, not 100% officially yet, but it was announced that actress Judy Greer is negotiating to be in the new Halloween film as Laurie Strode's daughter. And they believe that the character name could be Karen Strode. And I did a video on that. That was the last video I uploaded. You can check that out if you want. And there was an article from EW that talked about that. It wasn't an interview with Judy Greer, and I don't believe it was an interview with anybody close to the production. It was just sort of, they picked up the story from Deadline. I think it was let me just scroll down here, make sure I got that right. Yes, it was Deadline that originally reported that Judy Greer was in talks to be Karen Strode in the new Halloween film. And EW, which is Entertainment Weekly, a very reliable source, very much like the Hollywood Reporter, picked it up. But they're sort of just recycling everything that was said in Deadline for all intents and purposes. So, but there is something that they said in here that a few people have sort of messaged me about and wanting to know my thoughts. Well, you already sort of know my thoughts because this actually isn't coming from EW themselves. I don't believe that what I'm about to say is actually some sort of insight that EW has. They're just sort of recycling what was said in the official press release when it was announced that Jamie Lee Curtis was coming back to the franchise. And this is what it says here from EW. It says, Green and McBride are keeping exact plot details under wraps about the new Halloween film, but the new film is said, that's the important part of that, is said, okay? So that's not EW saying, we're saying this, right? That is EW saying it's been said from somebody else, somewhere else, so, you know what I mean? It's been said to pick up years after the events of the original 1978 film. And because this is a entertainment outlet where you're reading this, psychologically you think, oh, this is coming from EW. This is coming from Entertainment Weekly. Well, yes, for all intents and purposes, they are printing it out there, but they're getting it from that official press release that was released when Jamie Lee Curtis was announced as coming back to the franchise, the one that I read to you, right? Where it says, I'm going to get dark here because I switched over, where it says this, inspired by Carpenter's classic, filmmakers David Gordon Green and Danny McBride crafted a story that carves a new path from the events in the landmark 1978 film. So that more than likely, because that was the official, the official sort of press release about Jamie Lee Curtis coming back. And even though that part of the release sort of slipped under the radar and people weren't talking about it, it caught my interest a lot. And I think that's sort of where EW is getting that from, right? So they go, well, this is what it says, because EW's exact quote again is, let me go over here, where am I here? Again is, but the new film is said to pick up years after the events of the original 1978 film. Well, yes, it is said to do that. I mean, that's what the official press release said. Now, again, this could be a case of semantics, right? Because I know some people are saying, well, yes, but even though the sequel Halloween 2 came out in 1981, it was a direct, it's basically one movie with two separate parts, right? So the events in the sequel of Halloween 1981 are still happening in the year 1978. But personally, I don't think that's what it means, because if this was going to be an official sequel to Halloween 2, I feel that the press release would have said something to the effect of, after the events of Halloween 2, 1981, after the events of the sequel in 1981, or something like that. This, to me, clearly states that, yes, this is going to be a sequel to John Carpenter's original 1978 film, negating the events that took place in its sequel from 1981. Now, again, that's not to say that it's 100% confirmed that this is what it's going to be, but if you just take that at face value, the official press release, and you take at face value what EW printed, yeah, that is what it says. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that is what they're saying. But of course, this could be a case of semantics, and things could change as we go forward. Now, let's go on to the second part of our business, which is this quote. And I find this particularly interesting, folks, because I'm surprised nobody's talking about it. I mean, I am and I'm not, because there's so much going on over here. What's going on over here, or what was said over here, it seems to have slipped right under the radar, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's mentioning it. And at least if people have noticed it, nobody's talking about it or mentioning it. And you let me know in the comments section below if you're somebody who picked up on this as well and thought it was particularly interesting. And I'm talking about this quote from Jason Blum in the Coming Soon article. I'm going to switch over now to the Coming Soon article. So bear with me if the screen goes a little dark. And this is what Coming Soon says. Okay, so this is from Coming Soon. They say this. As a huge Carpenter fan, I was always curious about the Halloween 4 idea he had prior to the one that actually got made, which I believe Dennis Etchison wrote a script for, that was more about the idea of Michael Myers as a spirit. Did you ever talk to Carpenter about that script and the ideas he and Deborah Hill had? And Jason Blum's response is this. I didn't talk to him about that, but I think David might have. Whoa! Wait a minute! Shut the front door! Let me go over here so you guys can see me a bit better. I didn't talk to him about that, but I think David might have. Now, we're just reading text, right? And if any of you are on social media, which obviously you all are, you know how many misunderstandings can be interpreted through just text, right? If you don't put an LOL or a smiley face or a winky face, people think you're serious all the fucking time. Was this meant as, I didn't talk to him about that, but I think David might have? Or was it, I didn't talk to him about that, but I think David might have? Two very completely different interpretations. Do you know what I'm saying? So which one is it? Well, because it's 50-50, I'm surprised nobody's talking about this, because if Jason Blum did mean it this way, I didn't talk to him about that, but I think David might have? Whoa, wait a minute. This could be some very revealing information about the potential direction of this new Halloween film. Now, do I think that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride are going to do verbatim what that idea was for Halloween 4? No, of course not, because they're going to want to do their own film with their own ideas and their own script. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to take elements from that idea, elements from that original script. Because after all, John Carpenter is heavily involved in this new Halloween film. Although if you really want to know my thoughts on that, go watch a video I posted just a couple of days ago about how involved John Carpenter really is, and you'll get my thoughts on that. But that being said, I think he's more of a creative consultant than anything. But hey, if they're talking to him about that idea and he's like, oh, I approve, I think it's a great idea. David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, what did John Carpenter say? Get it. They get it. Interesting. Now, if you're not familiar with John Carpenter's original idea for Halloween 4, the one that Mustafa Akkad rejected, it was too cerebral, it was too out there, it was too like, what the hell is this? Then you need to go back and familiarize yourself with it. Okay, because John Carpenter, as I've mentioned in many of my past videos, was approached to write and potentially direct even Halloween 4. But you have to remember, and again, I've mentioned this in the past, but it bears repeating, John Carpenter's relationship to anything past the original Halloween. He doesn't have a huge affection for Halloween 2, even though he wrote it, he did write it, but he killed Michael Myers at the end of Halloween 2 because he didn't want the character and the series to become what it eventually became, right? Michael Myers was mortal. It was the evil inside him that may or may not have been immortal. But in the later sequels, Michael became immortal. He became, indestructible. And even David Gordon Green and Danny McBride are on record as to saying they want to go back to the roots. They want to go back to what, the mortal Michael Myers, the scarier Michael Myers, because they're on record as saying, and I believe it was Danny McBride that said this, that in the later sequels, Michael became like a Frankenstein. He was indestructible. It was predictable. You knew what was going to happen. You knew how every movie was going to end. It wasn't particularly scary, right? So anyway, that being said, John Carpenter's original idea for Halloween 4, again, I've mentioned it before, but it bears repeating, is essentially that it's 10 years later, Haddonfield is sort of depressed and run down. They've banned Halloween. They've banned all the masks. They've banned all the costumes. Nobody talks about it anymore. And that repression of Halloween, that repression of what happened 10 years earlier, ironically brings Michael Myers back. But brings Michael Myers back how? Sort of in this spiritual sense, this essence of Michael Myers. Is he really real? Is he literally brought back? Is he a ghost? Halloween 4 almost had a very cerebral, psychological, ghostly element to it, which sounds really interesting. But of course, Mustafa Akkad didn't like that, and we got what eventually we got. And a lot of you guys are probably very happy that we got that because you like Michael Myers being like a Jason or a Freddy or a Chucky that just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I'm not one of those people. But anyway, that being said, if David Gordon Green actually did have a conversation with John Carpenter about that idea, that's huge. And remember, let's say Jason Blum is completely denying knowing anything about that, hypothetically speaking. Well, even if he did know that David Gordon Green had a conversation with John Carpenter about it, he's not going to admit it to you. He's not going to admit it because then it sort of revealed the potential direction of this new Halloween film, and they're trying to keep that under wraps as much as possible. So even if he did know for absolute certainty that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride did have a conversation with Carpenter about that idea, he's not going to tell Coming Soon. He's not going to tell Variety or EW or The Hollywood Reporter, or he's not going to tell anybody about that because he wants to keep it under wraps. But the sheer fact that he didn't totally deny it, unequivocally deny it, and say, no, David Gordon Green did not have that conversation with John Carpenter is really interesting, because that means, whoa, wait a second here. There's some room for, there's some wiggle room here for the potentiality that he actually did, which means, this could be really interesting. I'm not saying that is the direction they're going. I'm just saying that it kind of makes sense in some ways, because then it justifies how Michael Myers is 60 years old, because he's not really 60 years old, right? He's actually the embodiment of somebody else in their 30s or 40s or 20s or whatever the case is. So then you kind of go, oh, that, now again, I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I have no evidence to suggest that's what they're doing. It could very well be literally 60-year-old Michael Myers coming back. It could be. But then that begs the question, if the film is really well done and it's really successful and it's really awesome, they're going to want to do more of them, right? So are we going to have a 60-year-old Michael in next year's Halloween, and then a 65-year-old Michael in the sequel a couple years later, and then, 10 years down the road and 4 or 5 films later, we have a 74-year-old Michael? That seems a little strange, doesn't it? So they're going to craft a story around something to do with age being irrelevant. Okay, that's my bold prediction, that I think they're taking elements from the idea that Carpenter had, not Carpenter's full idea, but just elements to help fit sort of the ideas that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride have. And it's going to be a meshing of sort of, but it's going to be really interesting. This might be a very different Halloween than we're used to. And I'm not talking about it's going to be completely cerebral and completely new agey and way the fuck out there. That's not what I'm saying. You're going to get the classic Halloween. You're going to get all the shit that you love. I'm just saying that I think there might be a different spin on this now. Okay? Especially with Carpenter on board. Now, we all know, like I've mentioned in the past, that he did write Halloween 2. He did. But he killed Michael at the end of Halloween 2 because he didn't want it to go on to become what it did become. And his idea for Halloween 4 was to bring Michael back, but was to bring him back in the essence of Michael, the spirit of Michael, the idea of Michael Myers. And that's interesting. That's really fascinating and interesting. So it was more of a psychological horror thriller bringing him back, which is a really interesting take. But Mustafa Akkad, as you guys know, didn't want to have anything to do with it. He wanted just the typical cookie cutter slasher film. And we got Halloween 4 and 5 and 6 and H2O and Resurrection. But anyway, yeah, comment below and let me know your thoughts on this. Did you guys see that quote? Do you find it interesting? Do you think I'm overreacting here? Because like I said, it could go one of two ways. It can be, I didn't talk to him about that, but I think David might have. I don't know. Which doesn't seem really probable, right? It doesn't seem like he's confident in that. Or is it, I didn't talk to him about that, but I think David might have. Whoa, wait a minute here. Because if David did, and John Carpenter's on record as saying they get it, this is really interesting. Really interesting. And that's all I have to say about that right now. I sound like Forrest Gump, and that's all I got to say about that. But anyway, no, it's true. That's all I have to say about it, because I need to think about it more. I need to think on it more, and I will do another video if some more insights come to me. But I needed to do this, and I needed to mention that because, yeah, it's very interesting. I need to think more on this. Comment below and let me know your thoughts, and I'll be back soon, hopefully, if I, have a chance to think more on it, and if new ideas come to me, and if I start to read some other things and I'm able to piece some things together, because we're talking about probability, right? Again, I don't know anybody who's working on the production. I'm not attached to the production myself. They're not shooting up here in Toronto. So again, I don't know anybody who's close to it. We're talking about probability based on evidence of what we can piece together right now. Doesn't mean it's 100%. Guys, do not comment below and go, that's fucking stupid. I'm not saying this is what's happening. I'm saying that when you look at that, you go, that's interesting. It's interesting, It's interesting, and it kind of makes sense, because they're going to have to justify where Michael's been, right? Regardless of whether they pick up after 1 or 2. If they pick up after 2, they have to justify how he survived the fire, okay, and where he's been for 40 years. If they pick up after 1, okay, they don't have to justify where, how he survived the fire, but they have to justify where he's been for 40 years, right? So either way, they have to justify a 40-year gap if it is in fact taking place in 2018 or 17. They have to justify that somehow, right? Interesting. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can at facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. McRae is MCRAE. Facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. Also, a reminder again, on Tuesday, October the 31st, 2017 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune into this channel, because I will be doing a YouTube live video of me watching the original Halloween from 1978. Now, again, you guys won't be able to see it or hear it for obvious reasons, but I want you guys to join me in watching it. Bust out your DVDs, bust out your Blu-ray, bust out your VHS, whatever the case is. Join me on Halloween night, Tuesday, October the 31st, 2017 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To watch Halloween with me. I'll have the chat room open, and you can ask me all sorts of questions about the movies and the series and all that kind of jazz, and it'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, if I start to piece some more things together, I'll let you guys know. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.